Today, I have the great honor to interview one of my favorite writers of all the times, who kindly accepted to receive the Cilento International Poetry Prize for his deep and precious narrative poetical work. And before starting, let me say it is a real pleasure for me to highlight that the Soprintendenza's Director ai Beni Culturali e Paesaggistici di Salerno e Avellino, Raffaella Bonaudo, and the curator of the Cilento Prize, Dottoressa Rosa Maria Vitola, who both with me strongly wanted to give you our prize, send you all their best wishes and congratulations for your amazing work in the field of literature.
Thanks to you and to all of them. And I'm not worth all these good words, and I'm happy for it, of course. Yeah.
Thanks.
So, and greet everyone you mentioned, please. Yeah.
Thank you. So, dear Jon, welcome, and let's start with our debate around your literature world, your literary world. I would like, although I read about your beginning, to open my interview asking you to kindly let all us know how your brilliant literary journey started. In particular, how and when you discovered the magic power of using yourself, the written word, and what this allowed you since the beginning.
Yeah, you know, when I was quite young, in my early teens, around 12 years old, I started out searching for, I guess, a kind of way to express myself for something. I played the guitar a lot, electric guitar and even classical guitar. I painted, I was drawing and painting, and I also wrote small lyrics to songs and quite fast, even small poems and quite short stories. And that's how it all began. I never became a good musician. I was not a really bad drawer, or perhaps I had a kind of a little talent for painting and drawing, but it was writing that felt the closest to me. And I remember in the beginning that I simply liked it because in my spare time wrote these small poems and stories. I felt like I found a secure place inside myself where I could reach a kind of peace and relate to the world in the same time, but with the distance of writing. So that's how it all began in a way. What I wrote in this early age, it was really bad, of course. I read, I found some pieces, and I'm ashamed. So, but still, I liked it, and but I didn't like school. I didn't like to go to school. I didn't like to write what I had to write in school. So this was a secret place. This writing was the opposite of the school writing somehow. Yeah, after a couple of years, I stopped playing the guitar completely for various reasons. I even stopped with this painting of mine, but I kept on writing. And when I was 17, 18, something like that, I wrote my first novel. It isn't published, and thanks God for that. I found it. I found the manuscript some years ago, and it wasn't completely bad, but it wasn't good, at least. It was very close to the writing of a Norwegian writer called Tarjei Vesaas. He's the most famous for a book called The Birds. And what I wrote was very close to a novel called The Ice Palace. So, and
Yes.
yeah, but I wrote, and I even wrote, of course, some more poems, etc. I don't know that this was when I went to what we call the gymnasium. That's the kind of school preparing for studies. Uh, so I grew up in a very small community, and to go to this kind of school, you had to leave home and to live by your own. So since I was 15, 16 years old, I've lived by my own.
No.
I think that was a good thing. Yeah, I had to rent a room in the village, to call it that, where the school was, and yeah, to live there and go back in the weekends now and then, and to my parents or my home, or in the holidays. So so it all began, but I never, be honest with you, had any ambitions of being a writer. I like to write, and I wrote, and it was no idea. I thought that was far beyond my reach in a way to become a real writer uh, or author. But then at 20, I wrote a novel. I sent it to a publisher, and they, to my great surprise, they wrote back to me and said that I wanted to publish it, but they wanted me to change this and change that and so on. And I should never have done it. It only made the novel worse, but I did it to have it published. This novel was called Red Black. And when I was just 23 years old when it was published, and I wrote it at 20. And at this time, something had happened. I don't know what exactly, but I had developed this a way of writing that is more or less the way I still write, I would say. And the main reason for developing this way of writing, it was that I started to think about writing as a kind of playing music. That I came into a musical state when playing, and I tried to recreate that in what I was writing. And all the repetitions and the variations and all this, that rhythm is that important in everything I write. It goes back to my young teenager playing the guitar and playing in a boys band and listening to music almost all the time. He stopped it. He quit with music and started writing. And after a while, he started to try to recreate in writing what he was creating in playing. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for this refined answer. You mentioned very many interesting and lovely things, actually. One is the idea you mentioned, God. So, in some way, it let me understand even more because I already read about this. About you, that you had a special moment, a special light in your life when you were very young that you saw. So you started to feel in some way also close to the idea of God. This is one
Yeah.
first thing. And also, I want to ask you about
Yeah.
the main
Yeah.
aim.
Yeah. Excuse me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, sorry. The main aim of your writing, because you said in the beginning, I didn't know I wanted to be a writer. So, what was the need to start to write? Was, as you said, because you wanted to fill up maybe something missing with music and find this second music that are the words?
You know, in Norwegian, we have this word, kunstnersjel. It means that you have the spirit of an artist.
Yes.
And some people have the spirit of an artist, and I
Yeah.
no doubt had it. I didn't have the energy or the ambition of a footballer or anything else.
Yes.
My interest was in art, not in sports, and I didn't care about it at all. So I'm completely disinterested. So, but this accident you're talking about, I think that it was, I think when I was only 7 years old,
Yeah.
and it took me many years before I understood how formative this has been in my life, to see life in this strange light and to experience myself in that kind of state. Of course, that gave me an experience far from anything my comrades and classmates and so on had experienced. And it made me, in a way, an outsider. But this experience didn't make me believe in God, at least not in the way they do or did in the area where I grew up. I grew up in a traditional Norwegian Lutheran society, and what they were thinking and preaching and teaching there, I felt as a pure stupidity. So I left church as soon as I could at 16. And I guess partly the reason why I had this kind of aggression towards the church and this kind of Christianity or Christendom, it was perhaps because I've had this kind of vision as a very young boy. It might be, I don't know. Perhaps not. And perhaps not. It also made me to this kind of, that I started to be interested in art, not in football, to put it that way, in writing, and not in, skiing or whatever. So it might, but you never know. Of course, I never know. I can't. That's not a causal relation here, but it all goes together, I think, into a kind of picture where all these elements that I was writing. I had this experience. I left the church at a very young age. These goes together, at least. Yeah.
Nice. Jon, you received in the motivation of a Nobel Prize. The reason was because you have been able to say things impossible to say in some way with common language. When I read this, I remember I thought about a poem of Giacomo Leopardi, the most important Italian poet, that when he was talking about Sylvia in his poem, he said, "Human being cannot say what I felt in my heart." So I guess that in some way he wanted to say that only art can express something deeper. So in some
Yeah,
way, do you agree with this then?
as far he said, if I understood it right, that words couldn't say what the heart wanted to say.
Yeah.
Well, that was the content.
Yes.
Yes, and of course I agree with that, no doubt. Yeah, it's very, very simple. In fact, if you fall in love, or to in simple words to retell that experience, it isn't possible. In Norwegian, you can say "jeg er forelska." In English, I fall in love. But they are almost saying nothing about what it's all about. To manage to do that, you have to go to art, I would say. Psychology perhaps could say something, the girl next door or some stupidity, and psychology, and biologist and blah, blah, blah. But the way it is experienced, and that is the human reality of it, I think it's only possible to say in good literature, I think. And that goes for a lot of these basic experiences in human life. The normal words used the normal way, they are saying almost nothing. The grief, the sorrow, the sadness when someone close to you is dead. You cannot say that I'm sad, I feel with you or something, but they're almost saying nothing. To manage to say something about that, you have to go to art, I would say. Not only writing, it's possible to say something crucial about it in music, I think, and even in painting. But this is art, and when it all comes to all, I think art, all art forms, in the end, are talking about the same, are trying to say something about the same. Yeah.
I love that you say this, also because I was writing something about this with the new movement, the Empathism. I was talking about art as only one. You cannot really separate this because the feeling, the pulsion that there are in the basic of every artist, let's say artist in the main sense, is always the same in whatever art.
Yeah, I do completely agree. It's the same, but you have different abilities as a human being for painting, for playing or composing, or for writing. Of course, different talents in a way for this or that. And in my case, my biggest talent was for writing, and I have this simple idea in a way that to have a talent for something, it's simply to have the ability to do it, to manage to do it, to manage to run fast, to write well, yeah, to play chess very well or something. You have a talent for it, you manage to do it, as simple as that. And I think you are, to a large degree, you must be born with this kind of talent or ability. You can try to achieve it. I tried to become a good musician, but I never really managed. So I didn't have the necessary talent for playing guitar. And I think a basic, you have this old mimesis concept that you are trying to make something like something else. And I think this mimetic ability is very important in a talent. If you can to tell if you have a talent or not, if you can paint or draw, well, it isn't that difficult for you to paint or draw a portrait, for instance. For me, no, I think I still could manage it, but then you have a talent for drawing or painting. If you have a talent for music, you hear a melody or whatever, and you can immediately play it on your instrument. You take it in immediately. You can, and for me as a writer, I experienced when I was very young that I could write as, let's say, Tarja Vesaas. I've already mentioned him. I could write as Knut Hamsun. I could use that style, write in that style. It wasn't difficult for me to copy their way of writing. I had this mimetic ability there. And then, of course, the point is not to write as someone else. It's if you have this talent, you can escape doing that.
Yeah.
If you know, yeah, then you can find your own way. You know you can do it. I know I can write like him or her or whatever, but because I can do that, I don't want to do it. I want to write it just in my own way. So to develop, I think to develop your own voice as a writer, I think this mimetic talent, it isn't necessarily there are for sure many other ways you can manage to write well, but I think it can be very helpful if you have this talent, or what you call it, this ability. Yeah.
Lovely. And so in some way, it came in my mind what T.S. Eliot was talking about when he wrote tradition and the individual talent. So what about the idea of tradition for you? It is something important, also the classics. So what were the first classic, the first myth for you, and how you cope with this?
I'm very occupied with the literary canon, to call it that, with literary tradition from Homer and on. I studied comparative literature, and that was a wise decision, I would say, but because then we had to read Homer, we had to read the Greek tragedies, Dante, and so on and so on. And I still keep reading Divina Commedia after all these years.
The main one.
When you write, you're at least I am writing in a kind of dialogue with what might be called tradition. I don't know, I'm talking about world literature, these main names, but you also have a national canon or national tradition for writing. In Norway, you could even say we have two, one in my language, nynorsk, the other one in bokmål. And also to write in a kind of relation or dialogue with the tradition, or for my part, mostly as a kind of negation of that tradition to a large degree. It was obvious not something I really and explicitly wanted, but something I actually did. And when it comes to, of course, literature comes from literature, as said, and there's a truth to that. When I was in my 20s, early 20s again, I read William Faulkner. He's one of the bigger influences on my writing, I think. And I read, not at least, the Austrian poet Georg Trakl. Yeah, and completely fell in love with his poetry. And I still am. I still am. I have left Faulkner behind. I tried to read him again for a year or two since, but I've read this before, but I don't have that feeling with Georg Trakl. And a third important name for me that I'm also, in fact, tired of by now, that's Samuel Beckett. No, so
yeah,
and
has been very.
I've already mentioned my two Norwegian biggest influences. It's Tarjei Vesaas and Knut Hamsun. And they are, of course, canonized Norwegian writers. In Norway, for sure, and Hamsun, to a certain degree, even abroad. He belongs to world literature in a sense. Vesaas on a lower level, but he ought perhaps to do it. And he is translated into quite many languages and So he is part in a certain way of world literature too. So, but that, of course, when I was 16, 17 or something, then I wrote Styravesos. I copied him. I was an epigon, as you say. To keep on writing like that, it isn't interesting at all. You have you have to write in your way. You have to find a kind of individuality that I guess each and every person has in it. Every human being has something quite unique to them. Not only the way they look, but inside, in their soul, in their heart, in their essence. There's a glimpse or a light, or what to call it, that is exactly unique for that person. But most persons don't even try to express that in an artistic way. But to do it or to write well, for instance, I think you have to write in your completely own way, but in a way that is communicating universally. The completely local you in this locale, in this small society, that must be understandable everywhere, yes, in a way. Yeah. So that's a paradox, of course, but I guess it's like that, at least as far as I can understand it.
I think that some very relevant things in your art are the use of dialect, because it allowed you to go in a deeper level, like the mother tongue level, and also the use of stream of consciousness. And if you can tell, like, and poetry, so all these in some way let you say the unsayable.
Yeah, you can say I'm writing in nynorsk, as we call it. And that was a language established in the late 19th century. It was a man called Ivar Aasen. He traveled around in Norway, gathered word, grammatical constructions, etc., and tried to find a system in it and a structure in it. And he managed, and he called that the Norwegian language. And that has, since his time and since he wrote his grammar and dictionary, it has changed quite a lot in many ways. But the fundamental side about this language is still the same. It is based on spoken language in Norway, here and there and there and there, but it isn't identical to any dialect. It isn't a dialect at all. It's a completely written language, like French. And that's my language. So I'm writing in a language without dialect, without sociolect, you could say. And in a certain sense, a constructed language that resembles, for instance, the way I speak very much. And it resembles also, to a large degree, the way my grandmother spoke. So if I'm to write something similar to something she wrote, I can write it in nynorsk, in my language, because it's so close to her dialect. But I cannot write it in the majority language, bokmål. Then it sounds as something quite different, coming from quite another place, and it's completely different. Yeah. So this language is in fact I feel very connected to it, and I also think that my way of writing is defined, or for sure framed by this language, by the sound of it, the structure, by each and every aspect in nynorsk as a language.
Actually, you have been dinging, to use the title of a famous poem of Shamshini. And also, I think I'm very fascinated about how you have been able to keep your eye on people with special problem in society, also met people and let them talk, so express their feeling, also using the stream of consciousness. That was very, very deep, very, very interesting. And I also wanted to ask you mm, about these characters that you talk about. Do you usually use an impersonal way so far from the people that you met from your life, or you usually you take inspiration from your own people that you meet, your own autobiography as well? What is your
You know,
relation with autobiography or impersonal writing?
you know, to me, literature it's about form or transformation. It's about creating a new language in a certain way. Each novel, each play needs to, in a certain way, seen in a certain way, to have its own language, its own universe and its own language. And when writing, you are creating this uniqueness, this unique language. And you're doing that by transforming, for instance, your own experiences, something you read or something you heard, whatever. But that's not the important thing. It's the transformation. It's the literary side of it. That because it's literature, it's the literary side that is the most important. Not that it's experienced like this or that by me or by someone else.
Yeah.
When that is said, of course, I have my voice as a writer and as a human being. I have my experiences like this and like that. For instance, we have talked about this accident when I was very young, and in a certain way, it's all about me. In a certain way, but it isn't so that I experienced it like this or like that, or
Yes.
that when I write about, I don't know how much what you have written of me, but let's say melancholy, for instance, when the novel about the painter Hertavik. Of course, I just tried to somehow to enter his mind by looking at his paintings and not write the beauty of the painting, the light. He's called the painter of light in Norway, but the other side of it, the frenetic side, the dark side, yeah. And you see, and it goes without saying in a way. For instance, when I wrote this novel, when I wrote trilogy. I don't know what you have read or what is I can refer to what is published in Italy. But then I'm writing about a very young couple. She is pregnant and they have no place to live, no nothing, and they leave in a boat to try to find a place and find a life. I haven't experienced it like that, but of course I've experienced similar situations in my life. So I'm, this autofiction that's so highly prized, or has been so highly prized. That's not my cup of tea, to put it that way. I'm too traditional. I'm too occupied with the literary tradition, with literature as literature, to be engaged by that. That doesn't mean that I cannot read, let's say, Arnaud with great pleasure, and I can admire her, that she's so honest and that she has the guts to write in a way so bad as she actually does, to make it resemble her life as much as possible. But that isn't my literature and my way of coping with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to tell you that I felt when I was reading "Me is another" in Italian is translated like "io è un altro," and also the other name, l'altro nome.
Yeah.
I felt in this a lot of empathy, and I want to ask you how much. Do you feel empathetic with your characters or with the world or with the other artists in general?
Yeah, I think I haven't written there's not a single evil person in anything I've written, I would say. There's something good to each and every one of them.
Nice.
And I don't know why. I don't know. I cannot tell it. But I don't see any point in writing an evil portrait, a sarcastic portrait, or whatever. Or to talk people down like Arnaud or who it might be. I dislike it to a large degree. And I guess that has perhaps also something to do with me as a human being, that I very rarely dislike or people very much I'm not interested in your car and the way you are trying to look like a very rich man, etc., etc. But I don't hate, really dislike this man because of that. And I'm never writing about that kind of people anyhow. So they are even the ones who are doing evil things are seen in a kind of reconciliation as a in the light of a kind of peace, to put it that way.
Lovely. Okay. Another question I want to ask you is about the importance in your writing about places and objects. I mean, are places have been very important for you, or you think, for instance, if you were Italian, would have been writing the same things? How much places influenced yourself
I don't
and
think
the
that.
objects in this?
Let's say if I grew up in Italy, I would have written in another way. I'm quite sure. I grew up in a small community, and close by the Hardangerfjord, and there's closeness to the fjord, that there were a kind of distance between the houses. There was a narrow road along the fjord to listen to the waves, to go out in a small boat on the fjord, and it's a powerful landscape with high mountains, and there's a glacier you can look at over there. So, it's one of the most famous landscapes in Norway, Hardanger. When you had a national romanticism, it became a kind of this landscape was the most favorable, the Hardanger landscape. So, of course, such a strong landscape makes a huge impression on you, of course. When you learn the word mountain, you see that huge mountain. When you learn the word glacier, you see that glacier. When you learn the word wave, you know the waves are going all day long, all day long. So, and house, there's one house there, there's one house there. It's not like in a city, houses all over the place. It's this empty spaces, this darkness, especially when I was small, there were no road lights. It came some years later, but then it was completely dark, and you could only see the light in a house there. Then you walked for some 100 meters, and there was a house there with some light. So it's of course, and you learn in this landscape. You grew up, you become a part of the visible world, to put it that way, and you learn to you learn language in connection to this landscape. The basic words: walking, talking, mountain, hue, whatever. It's connected to this landscape in a certain way. So let's say when I wrote Septology, I was sitting. Then I lived in a small town outside Vienna, on the outskirts of Vienna, for quite many years, in fact. And I spent 4 or 5 years on writing that novel. And I didn't write anything of it here in Norway, where I am now, or no, I'm far from the fjord. No, I'm in the center of Oslo. So, but to me, it was easier, in fact, to see this coastal landscape. That's my landscape from a distance in Italy. No, in Austria, I mean, or it could also have been Italy, but from a distance, yeah. So, but I'm if there is a kind of landscape in what I'm writing, it is connected to the landscape where I grew up. I grew up by the fjord, that's right, basically there, but even by the ocean outside a town called Haugesund, where you have the North Sea coming in, the more brutal coastal side of Norway. And that's basically formative, both for the language and for me as a person. So if you ask for personal experiences in my writing, they are there, not in what it's actually about, this or that happening, or driving that way, or yeah, falling in love, or whatever. That's fiction. But the basic experience and the basic voice, that's not fiction. Yeah. But one thing, my first novel were very black. They aren't translated. This red black novel. It's about a young man. He's in his late teens, committing suicide. And my next novel, called Closed Guitar, that's about a girl, a lonely mother, who has a flat, and she goes out in the morning just to put away the garbage, and the door is closed, and she hasn't a key with her, and she doesn't manage. She cannot understand how to cope with the situation, so she tried to find the caretaker, and she doesn't manage. Then she thinks she has to take a bus, so she goes into a town. The child is inside, so she gets completely confused. And this novel, it isn't translated either only into Swedish, I think. And this first novel isn't translated into any language. So, and these early novels of mine, they are very, very black, I would say, very, very. But then there came to a change a bit later, where there came a kind of reconciliation, to use that word, to my writing, and it became, at least to a certain degree, a kind of tragicomical writing. I just pick a book. Wait a little bit. Yeah. I have been wondering, I can see that this change is there, and what it's all about, that I don't know. But then you see this Italian book.
Wait, I cannot read on the.
Perhaps will it be the best?
Keep this, yes. Just keep without moving. put a bit down, sorry, because strangely, no, I cannot read.
No, it's
Can you read? Or
I
maybe
read
just try to show me.
in my Norwegian Italian, Bagliori Italiani. It's the title, and that's
Bagliori Italiani. Yeah.
yeah. And he who has published this book, he is called Franco Parelli.
What is the name?
Franco, his first name.
Uh-huh.
Second name is Parelli.
Okay.
P-E-R-R-E-L-L-I.
Yeah, I heard of it.
You know him, yeah.
Yeah.
And he wrote to me and made a kind of resume of his theory about my writing, and that was that it was the opposite of the dark and nihilistic writing of, for instance, Beckett. It was a kind of it was transcending that kind of writing. The people were not, they were always in a way waiting for the light in a certain way in my writing, and that gave this kind of let's call it hope, or what you call it. The way I think it's worth reading what he writes a bit. The way he wrote it in English to me, a very short summary, and that was very much to the point. I hadn't talked about it like that myself before, but the way he was thinking about it and describing it, it made sense to me. This change that happened to my writing at a certain point. Yeah.
Very interesting. Also, this Bagliori, these lights, also remind that light that you saw when you were 12 in some way,
Of
there is
course.
this lights.
Yeah, it's and that goes.
Circle.
I was connected to the Quakers for a period of my life, and my grandfather was a Quaker, and of course this painter Lars Sattervik, he's a relative of mine back there. They were Quakers, all of them, and the main concept for the Quakers, it's the inner light, that every human being has the inner light, and that is that of God in each and every human being. And they sit in a silent circle when they have their meetings, and they try to concentrate on this inner light and to make that present, so to say, in the room. This concept of the inner light and even the painting of Lars Hattervik have influenced me a lot, and also this Quakerish way of thinking. And in the Christian tradition, this duality between light and darkness has always been important in a certain way. So there's nothing original about it. In a play of mine called The Summer's Day, I used the phrase the shining darkness, or the luminous darkness. It's also translated like that. And I thought, I felt, oh, that was a good expression. And then I read Meister Eckhart, you know him, the medieval mystic, and he had used exactly the same phrase. So it was, it wasn't. I wasn't an original writer. I was just, in a way, quoting him without knowing it. So, but then a Swedish critic wrote a book about my place, and that's called in English The Luminous Darkness too. He used that as the title, and I think this doubleness, my writing, it's quite dark in a way, but there's also this light to it somewhere, and I guess that's what Parelli, how to pronounce it, is trying to write or say something about. Yeah.
Fantastic. Jon, I also mentioned before something about objects. Like for me, I'm sure that they are very important for you. An Italian philosopher called Remo Bodei was making a distinction between objects and things. Like objects are things that we use and throw away, and things are like some special objects that we keep forever in our house, like something from our childhood, and that became we give a special meaning at that objects. What about you? What are the things of your life, the special objects of your life?
You know, when I was growing up, I felt very connected to especially the house of my grandparents. That was an old, typical house for the western part of Norway. And I got very engaged by old houses and felt very connected to them. My life since then has been a journey. I've been living here, I've been living there, a lot in flats and everywhere and nowhere in a way. So I don't have that many things that I feel connected to in such a way, but in a more so to say stupid way. I got very excited and fascinated by the Macintosh, Apple, and the Mac when that came.
Yes.
And the first power book ever produced and sold, I bought that. It was extremely expensive. This fascination for the Mac, a lot of things happened in these years. They got faster. They got a color screen. The operating system became better. They almost got corrupt, and then Steve Jobs came back, etc., etc. So it was very fascinating. A fascination for me until Steve Jobs died, and since then it's gone. I'm still using the Mac, but it's just a tool, not something I do to do my work. But what I'm really interested in, when I lost the interest for the Mac, I got a new fascination, and that is for fountain pens. So I have quite a collection by now, and lately I bought several Italian fountain pens. You have, I think it's close, not that far from you. You have a producer called Leonardo fountain pens, and they make some very beautiful pens. It's a small family-run company, for instance. And I have far too many fountain pens. And I use in later years, I've also written the first versions of, let's say, of A Shining, this novella that was written by hand, the first version of it. My latest plays I've also written by hand. So, and a novel to be published in years to come. It's all in the first version is written by hand with a fountain pen. So the things in this sense, and of course I love old used object that has the traces of life in them, like an old house in a certain way has. But in my writing, I don't think they play a central part object in that respect, as far as I can see myself.
Yeah. Okay. About our contemporary age, thinking about the past and modernism, they were talking with Eliot Joyce. They were talking about paralysis, in particular the town, in particular London, cities like that. Do you think after also pandemic problems and that we are in a sort of paralysis in the contemporary age as well? And you write about this kind of paralysis.
No, I don't think that. I think that I'm perhaps writing about a possible hope, a possible peace, a possible reconciliation, to use that word again, in this situation. I'm not like Beckett. It's after the Second World War and everything there. It was completely dark. My writing isn't completely dark. There's a kind of hope to it. And that it isn't because I want it to be there. I never want to write anything. If you want something, then you write bad. At least I write bad. If I want to write this like this or that, then I write bad. I have to let the writing write itself. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a basic rule. I never plan anything. I just sit down, write, and listen to what I've written and what I'm, and in a certain way to what I'm going to write. But it's exactly what I'm writing there and then. So and then it's writing. It happens. Martin Heidegger, he said that art happens, and writing as a kind of art also just happens. And the way it happens, it can say, I think my writing is saying something about our present situation. And I guess that's also why both my plays and my novels are that much translated and read and in a way appreciated that much that I even got a Nobel. So I think there's there's a kind of hope, to put it that way. It's not only in my writing. It isn't obvious or something. It's in the darkness. There's some lights and there's some, yeah.
So, Jon, do you believe in the figure of the artist as a guide for this society or not? Do the society still need the artist as someone able to give some answers to the contemporary society, people?
I don't think so. But I think if you took art and the artist away from society, it would be a very brutal place to be. So art and artists are needed in a society to be a place where people can live, where it's possible to live. And in good art, it has, I would call it's light. If it be it Lars Hertavik and his painting, or the painter I've been the most concerned about in later year, Mark Rothko. His painting, you have this dark feel and this orange feel or something, but they are speaking, and there's a kind of light coming from, and a kind of message coming from his painting to me. Of course, the pictures are mute, but still they talk, at least to me, and to many other people, and they talk in a similar way, I think. In fact, as literature also does. It's a silent language coming from a Rothko painting. It's also silent language coming from one of my novels. Yeah. And it's a silent language. It's all about, in a way. Yeah.
Yes, great. Jon, a last question, and then I leave you the rest of this long interview. I wanted to thinking about Tonio Kruger, the character of Thomas Mann. He was saying if you feel too much, and also he was using a painter as an example. If you feel too much, your opera, your art will be not so good because you are too much inside to that. I want to ask you about your relation with deep emotions, feeling, how important are in your art, and how you try to not to be too much involved in that.
Yeah. It's the same with an actor. If an actor or actress is expressing a lot of feelings, she takes the feelings away from the audience. It's the audience that are going to feel, not the actor or the actress. That I find as a basic rule for theater. And this rule also goes for literature, I would say. If you write a lot about emotions, so like this and like that, then you're writing bad. I don't think I don't think I ever have done it. In fact, there are of course emotions into each and every situation, into every language. Every sentence has emotion and a kind of mood to it. And but if you're trying to say it directly, then it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Just like this actor staying crying, then, oh yeah, there's an actor staying there crying, you think from the audience. But if the actor is playing in quite another way, a very neutral way, then you in the audience can feel a great sadness. So it's the same goes with writing. To me, I used to love to drink, but I very early learned that even a glass of red wine, then I got too sentimental, emotional. Yeah, I started to write with too much feeling and a lack of precision. Writing is to a large degree about precision, and that again is about the rhythm. Yeah, and need to be completely precise and completely sober and completely cold in a certain sense to write well. The proof of that is this glass of red wine. If you take that, if I read it the day after I've had something to drink, no, it's bad. It's bad writing. Yeah.
Great, great. Dear Jon, thank you so much. I am so happy, honored of this interview. We have been talking of so much beautiful arguments, things, and literature is grateful for this interview. So I say you bye. We wait you in Cilento area. We also are a small part of Italy, and we have beautiful landscapes. So I hope
Yeah.
one day soon to see you here.
Yeah, when things calm down to get the Nobel, that's a busy. Then you get really busy.
I can imagine.
So yeah, so and of course I'm happy for the prize and for this interview, and I want to thank you for the interview and for the prize, and hope to see you one day here or there, and
For sure, for sure.
in this world. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, goodbye, Jon.
Goodbye. Goodbye. Bye bye. Yeah.
Bye bye.